Shall we just jump straight into it and see where it takes us?
Jump in like a human cannonball.
Flying off the trapeze.
Yeah.
I'm flapping. Can you hear me flapping? Hi, Internet. It's Emily SW.
Sam.
And we are coming at you with part 2 of Knights of the Circus by Angela Carter. Well, technically parts 2 and 3, because the book has 3 parts.
This is part 2 of our coverage.
Yes, it will cover parts 2 and 3, because I don't think we'll have as much to say about these parts that we haven't already covered.
Okay, that's fair. I was gonna say, you'll probably say that, and then we'll still yap on and on and on.
Either we come in here and we get it done, bing bang boom, or we come in here and we just chatter. But I guess that's what a podcast is, right?
Chatter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just chatter it and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, that's true. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I know a lot of them do have themes and scripts and stuff, but a lot of them don't. Right?
No, most of the podcasts that I enjoy listening to are kind of like this style where there's a topic or a theme or some general sort of something that makes it cohesive. But the thing that makes it fun is the chemistry. The banter. It's the parasocial aspect. Because I've had an epiphany recently that my hyperfixation is just parasocial relationships of all kinds.
Okay.
K-pop, people who play video games online, vloggers, podcasters. Anyways, we could get into that, but we're not going to because Knights of the Circus does not involve parasocial relationships.
Or does
it? Actually,
it does.
It does involve parasocial relationships. That's true. That's a good point. It's just not through a screen, which is mostly how I enjoy my parasocial relationships.
No, because the setting is 1899, as we mentioned previously, yes. And they did not have screens at home to look upon. I can't say they didn't have screens because movie theaters did exist.
But yeah, people are definitely extremely parasocial with Fevers. That's kind of Walzer's whole thing. Not to mention all the people she describes as sending her gifts and money and...
It's just the nature of celebrity, right?
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
Last time, we had put forth the question, have you gone to the circus? Or have you been to a circus?
That's right, we did.
And we said we would answer that in this part. So the question, have you ever been to a circus?
No. Point blank, period. I was thinking about this. I was trying to figure out if I had even gone to anything circus adjacent. I've been to fairs. You know, like places that have small little rides or fair food with like the popcorn and all that stuff. But I've never been to an actual circus that had performers or, well, circuses these days don't really have animals because of the abuse. I've never...
A fair has a lot of carnival elements to it. Well, I have been to a circus.
Oh, okay.
I've been to 2 circuses.
Oh.
One to make up for yours.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Now, here's the thing. They were both when I was in elementary school. So my memories of them are a little slim.
Yeah.
The first time I went, do I even remember like where exactly it was? No. One thing I remember very clearly is that we were stuck at an intersection, like the light was red and there was oncoming traffic. And then there was a fire truck behind us trying to get through. But my friend's mom literally couldn't go anywhere because there were also cars parked on the street.
Yeah.
She could not go anywhere without just like pulling into traffic, and she was kind of
freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah. We got there and it was kind of before the show started, and they were letting kids like do the bouncy jumpy thing.
Okay.
My friend did it. I was not asked if I wanted to do that. I probably wouldn't have anyway. And then we got like those like slushy things.
Oh, like the ice.
The ice with the syrup on it. It wasn't like a
snow
real...
cone.
Snow cone, yeah. But the snow cone was in this lion-shaped cup, and it had like an opening lid. I wonder what happened. I know we kept that for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is now. I'm sure it's long gone.
That sounds like fun.
Do I remember anything about the actual performance? Back then, they still had animals in it. I'm pretty sure there were elephants. I mean, they even had tigers at the fair until pretty recently.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there were animals. And then the second time was actually for a school trip. I also don't really remember a whole lot about that. There were definitely like acrobats and trapeze artists and clowns and the whole thing. But one thing I remember about that is all the kids, like, the next day on the playground, they would be like, well, I wanted them to fall. I paid money to see them fall. And even, as you know, as a 7-year-old, I was like, you didn't pay anything. No. What are you talking about? A bunch of 7-year-olds trying to be edgelords. wanting to see the trapeze artist
That
fall.
tracks.
They had net. I know they had nets, so like
Yeah,
nothing was going to happen. Besides the fact these people are all professionals. Like the professional trapeze artist, Fevers was never going to fall.
This trapeze artist didn't have wings, just a safety net and tons of training.
True, but close enough. We don't have this kind of magic in our world, so...
No, not to our knowledge.
We have to pretend. But finally, in the story, we get to the circus.
We do. Finally. And boy, this circus makes me think that maybe I didn't miss anything not going to a circus. And that is also, we're getting the behind the scenes. So
the behind the scenes of everything will probably put you off of it.
Yeah.
Well, part 2 starts with Jack Walzer telling his boss that he's going to
join the circus
so he can get more of the scoop on Fevers. And I have to say, this man is impulsive.
Yeah. He somehow has no personality, but is also incredibly impulsive.
Yeah. His boss, I don't know, he doesn't really let him go, but he also lets him go. He goes, in any event.
Yeah, I think Walzer was going to go, regardless.
We catch up with Walzer, and he's supposed to be reporting back, keeping up with his journalist duties.
And that does happen for a while. He has a typewriter.
It doesn't last for very long.
No, it doesn't. The one interesting thing, so when he goes to join the circus, and he's talking to the guy that runs the circus, Colonel Kearney, who is an American, and he's an American, because he wears the American flag as a suit and has a $ sign on his belt buckle. Funniest thing about it to me was that he has this magic pig.
Sybil was my favorite character.
Sybil was the best character, hands down. But it struck me that literally capitalist pig. The pig is making money. It is... I think we mentioned in the first part, this book is not subtle.
I can forgive Sybil because she is, in fact, a literal pig.
Yeah, she's a literal pig, and, she's not hurting anybody.
But she also knew what was up, because she's also a fortune-telling pig.
Mm-hmm.
Kearney relies on her to make all his decisions.
Which I feel like is further commentary on Americans and capitalism.
So when Jack approaches him and says he wants to join the circus, and the colonel's like, well, what can you do? And he says to Sybil, what can he do? And Sybil, she rates it out with her snout, right?
Yeah, that was very cute. It was
clown.
Yeah.
Clown.
Yeah, she burned him. That pig, sick bars. It very much reminded me of Charlotte's Web. Some pig, but I'm a big E.B. White fan. So I don't know if that was directly a reference. There are a lot of references in this book.
There are. I think I said to you last time there were Shakespeare references.
Mm-hmm.
Some were more subtle than others. Some were just Lizzie referencing the bard in name.
Yeah, literally bringing him up.
There were references to Yeats,
mm-hmm.
which Emily and I discussed one of his poems in a previous episode.
Yeah, check that out.
But because I'm not familiar with any of his other work, I didn't catch any of it at all. I only know this from reading reviews where people were talking about it. But I don't know any of those references.
Yeah, there's a lot of just little one-off, I forget what exactly it is, but there's a reference to Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. And there's, at the end, which we'll get to, but there's a reference to Hemingway, A Movable Feast. So it could be a reference, it could just be capitalist pig, haha, that's funny.
What I was thinking was that it's absolutely silly for a human man to be relying on an animal to be making all his decisions.
I mean, this might tie into the circus imagery and fairs and stuff like we were talking about. I feel like that's kind of baked into American mythology a little bit. The idea of kind of boisterous countryman who's got some sort of magnificent animal, or the snake oil salesman. He reminded me of that trope, that kind of American salesman kind of trope.
Okay.
Just because of his jovial personality and...
Nothing gets him down.
And another thing, this is a very minor detail, we have 6 inches again with the Colonel. He took the saliva-rimmed cigar butt from his mouth and knocked 6 inches off the end onto the carpet. So
How long is his cigar?
So not only does Fevers have 6-inch long eyelashes, and so then I'm like, is it numerology? Does Angela Carter just really like the number 6? I don't know. I didn't notice it anywhere else, but here I was 6 inches off a cigar. And then I was like, wait a minute.
Maybe that's supposed to give us, like, Feathers, where it's kind of telling us that she's an enormous person.
Yes, larger than life.
I don't think we're supposed to get the sense that the Colonel is himself a physically enormous person, but that everything he surrounds him with is enormous and grand.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting coincidence that everything in this book is 6 inches. So that's the Colonel who runs the circus. And basically, his plan is to go all the way across Europe, Russia, and make it to Russia, make it to Japan. That's the plan. That's the goal. And so, Walzer becomes a clown.
Yeah,
well, he was already a clown.
He becomes a clown in more ways than one. But here's the thing. I guess we have to talk a little bit about the structure of the circus here. Because you have, obviously, the Colonel is the owner.
Yep.
He's in charge. Well, Sybil's in charge. Sybil,
the puppet master pig.
So capitalism is the driving force here. And then you have the stars of the show, Feathers. And then there's another family of trapeze artists that are big stars. And you have the strongman and the tiger tamer. The circus has almost roles that you expect, right? Like every circus has the same kind of performers in it. And we were sure to get every single type of role that you could think of. At the very bottom of the hierarchy here are the clowns. I was thinking too, the clown is like the entry level position. So that also made sense for Jack to be cast as a clown because he obviously doesn't have any experience doing anything else.
There's nothing extraordinary about him. Jack has he's a successful journalist. That's it. He has no physical talent. He can't be a trapeze artist. He does not have a particular way with animals. He doesn't even have a particular way with people. People don't really like him. At least Feathers and Lizzie didn't particularly trust him, but he has nothing about himself that he could use, so they're like, well, slap some makeup on you, put you in the masses. Like, he's basically a foot soldier.
Yeah, kind of.
An infantryman to be...
in the circus.
Yeah.
Let's say, I thought it was really odd. Now, we spend a lot of time in the backstage. We don't really see a lot of performance in this, except for one, like, very key scene. But he's in his wig and makeup all the time.
All the clowns are.
And it's almost like they lose their identity outside of being the clown.
In Walzer's case, he has a disguise, right? He doesn't want Feathers to know he's there. So it kind of makes sense, but all the clowns do it. There's a scene where they're having, breakfast? They all...
Yeah, they're not even staying in the same living space as the rest of the circus. Feathers is in a very luxury hotel. She's got very nice accommodation. And all the clowns are living with this older Russian lady and her grandson.
In, like, tents. They're, like, on the fairgrounds. They're not in a building.
Yeah, very low budget accommodation for the clowns.
They're the bottom of the barrel. They're the bottom rung. And the comedy they do is also, like, their performance reflects that. Very base.
Yeah, very crude comedy.
Crude comedy, you've got violence, you've got... The one performance they do describes Buffo, the main clown. His name is Buffo. And maybe he had another name at one point, but we only know him as Buffo.
I think it does make a point of saying, like, his name, even to him, is almost lost.
Yes. He literally dies, and the clown performance is a physical comedy of them trying to get him in a coffin, and he won't fit in it because he's a very large man. Then at the end, he springs up, woohoo, he's not dead. And this comes up. I also have a lot of thoughts about the clowns in the metaphor there. Just the cultural context of a clown. Clowns, tricksters, jesters. They're not all the same, but they're very similar. And the clowns in this story especially, I think, kind of reflect base parts of humanity. The uncivilized portions, shall we say. They sort of reflect back humanity at us in a way that's critical of it. Am I making sense?
Well, because there's a lot of discussion with the clowns especially about how they put on a performance that's very jovial and comedic, but they themselves are not happy.
No, they're miserable. Buffo is a binge drinker. They're all incredibly miserable.
Like you were saying with the show being violent and stuff, they take all these elements that would be very unpalatable outside of their performance, and they make it part of the act. So they're showing you violence, but it's meant to be funny. You're meant to laugh at their misfortune in their own act.
All the while, they're smiling the entire time. Mm-hmm. The painted smiles.
Right, and Buffo had the one quote he says to Walzer, "A child is innocent until he laughs at a clown." And like, I remember that verbatim, because I just read that, and you're like, whoa.
I have 2 bookmarks on that page, actually. Because this entire scene where he says that, Buffo has just some of the most poignant and depressing dialogue about the state of humanity. He really is. But so at one point, they're sitting at this table, and it literally describes them as being set up like the Last Supper, of the clowns all sitting in the same order of the Last Supper. And he's basically just going on this whole soliloquy about the meaning of a clown in society, which is a little on the nose. But one of the things that I also found interesting, aside from the quote that you just said, is he compares them to whores, which kind of ties back into Fevers and that whole theme in the first part of the book about brothels and sex workers and all that kind of thing. And Buffo says, we subject ourselves to laughter from choice. We are the whores of mirth. For, like a whore, we know what we are. We know we are mere hirelings hard at work, and yet those who hire us see us as beings perpetually at play. Our work is their pleasure, and so they think our work must be our pleasure, too. So there is always an abyss between their notion of our work as play and ours of their leisure as our labor. You could spend so much time unpacking that paragraph, but I think the comparison to whores is interesting because, as we discussed in the last part, a lot of Fevers' stories deals with growing up in a whorehouse and the different environments, because she had that very pleasant upbringing in the first one, and then she had that horrible experience with the freak show in the second one. So I think that ties that in, but now we're seeing, instead of women being subjugated, we're seeing the lowest of society being subjugated. But so we have this reversal here where Fevers is the top of the food chain. She's revered. She has this really nice hotel. People come to see her specifically. She's on the posters. The trapeze artist, she's talent. And now, at the bottom, we have these men, these clowns, who nobody comes to the circus to see the clowns. They're just there. They're just filler, essentially. They're not there because of talent. They're not there because they have some special whatever. They're there because they have nowhere else to go. And they're only there to be laughed at. It's depressing.
Well, it's kind of interesting, too, because when you look up circuses and stuff, you go online, type in circus, the first thing that comes up usually is a clown.
Yes, and also, notably, very common fear.
That's true.
Very common phobia is clowns. And that even, as you mentioned, the clowns are living with the Russian lady, the cook, and her son, Ivan?
Her grandson.
Ivan. And Ivan is terrified of the clowns.
At first he was, yeah.
At first he's terrified of the clowns.
Ivan is the son of the woman whose whole story we got in that prison. That I think was completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's where Jack Walzer is now. He's really learning about the nitty-gritty of circus life.
Walzer is kind of going through a similar journey to Fevers now. What are you chewing on? Yeah? Is that so?
What do you think about clowns? I'm the clown? Is that what you just said?
But anyways.
Jack
is going through a similar journey to Fevers, where he's at this bottom, he's in the whorehouse of the circus.
Okay, well here's the thing. No, last time we mentioned eggs.
Yes.
Jack is the egg. Or he's in the egg.
Yeah.
Fevers already hatched from her egg.
Mm-hmm.
Jack is still inside the egg.
Yes.
He hasn't hatched yet.
Mm-mm. Well, and there's a scene later where he's literally a chicken, too.
Oh, yeah. That becomes his role in the clown act. He's the human chicken. But there's a reason for that. Before that, he decides to start, I guess, exploring around the circus tents. He accidentally disturbs a class full of, I think, what are they, chimpanzees? I think they just got called apes.
They just call them apes, but they're definitely supposed to be chimpanzees.
Oh, yeah, he just disturbs the professor's class. The professor is an ape. His students are apes. This is where Jack's impulsivity, I think, gets him again. Multiple times.
It does.
Because he lets the apes kind of do whatever they want with him, which include taking all his clothes off.
Yeah, so we have, this scene is it's a reversal. So the apes are studying Jack as a human, and they're portrayed there as being the intelligent beings.
That's right. In my notes, I wrote that the professor was the smartest man in the entire book, which is really funny because he is not, in fact, a man.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure that was intentional. That entire scene was
I had to reread that scene because
there was so much going on.
There was a lot going on, and I was just like, this is not how humans behave.
No, there's literally, in that scene, the chimpanzees are having this lesson, and they pull Jack in, and they start using him as an anatomy lesson, and they're learning whatever. And then in the background, you've got two people having sex in the stands.
One of them is supposed to be supervising the apes, but she has nearly no interest in them at all. And the other one is the circus strongman.
And they're going at it. So this scene, while you're reading this scene, it keeps coming back to them going at it. And the apes, and Jack is like, well, I guess I'll just stand here. Like, this again, I think, comes back to, this story is not very grounded in any sort of reality. It's completely absurd. And I wrote down, because Gothic is usually moralistic, right? There's usually a moral, good and evil, whatever. This isn't really that, but it has a very fable fairy tale quality where it's teaching a lesson. It's trying to teach you a lesson. And it's like, if you don't pick up on it, you must have your eyes closed.
That's, I think, more in line with Angela Carter's specialty than the Gothic genre in particular, because she was more of a fairy tale author.
Yeah, so I think the outrageous
caricatures.
Yeah. I can't talk today. The outrageous kind of stretching of humanity and stretching of what's possible. Like, it's very clearly just, this is what I'm trying to tell you. This novel exists to hammer home the metaphor.
But this whole very bizarre scene is suddenly interrupted.
Oh yes, the tigers.
But yeah, one of the tigers escapes.
Jack, no personality, Mr. Impulsivity, sees it going towards the lady, and the strongman's like, ah, that, I'm out of here.
Yeah, he just takes right off.
Yeah, he's like, okay, goodbye. See ya. And then the tiger's going after the lady, and Jack is like, oh, I gotta save that lady. Why?
Also, very ironic, because the strongman's supposed to be,
Yes.
the guy with the muscle, but he's a big coward.
He's a big coward, and then here we have the lowliest of the Circus Society stepping in.
Throws himself on the tiger,
Gets
so
mauled.
It doesn't attack.
Not to death.
No. He survives this whole story.
And that is how we reunite with Fevers. Fevers treats his wounds, stitches him up, and she knows who he is. She's not happy.
He rescues this young woman from the tiger, and then she becomes integrally important. We get her whole, I'm going to call it a trauma dump.
Oh my god, it was so traumatic. This poor woman, I feel bad for her, and she doesn't even exist.
Think of every bad thing that could happen to a young girl in the 19th century.
Yeah.
And then that's what happens.
That's what happens.
So her father murdered her mother, threw her body in a pond, and then for some reason decides he needed the knife that he killed her with to make dinner. So he goes back to look for the knife and drowns. This is, again, why?
Yeah.
Why would you do this? I understand, okay, you throw the knife in to get rid of the weapon, but like, why?
He immediately got his karma.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're gonna jump back into the water to look for a knife that you just murdered someone with because you want to use it to cut your dinner.
Yeah.
So that makes her and her sister orphans. And she proceeds to spend the next number of years of her life getting abused in various ways by various men.
Yeah, it is really depressing, and also depressing in that this is almost one of the most realistic parts of the story.
No, here was the worst part, because for a while she lived with a complete charlatan who was using her to have fake seances.
Yes.
And talk to
spirits. Trick people.
Tricked families into thinking they were talking to the spirits of, like, their daughters and stuff. He gets caught. She actually, for a while, does live on her own. She has a job. She works in a cafe. She has her own apartment. She's doing good for herself.
Yeah.
Like, at this point is where I think her story should have stopped. This was the high note. And then the ape trainer comes to her cafe and convinces her to run away with him. And like some of the other men in the story, they call him the Ape Man. He is also an alcoholic.
Horrible.
And he spends most of his time abusing her.
Mm-hmm.
She makes one friend who is, I think he was supposed to be a young man around her age. It tells us very clearly that he was gay. They become very good friends. And he, being a gay man, didn't want anything from her sexually, so they were actually able to have a normal friendship, and she wasn't getting involved with someone else who's going to start abusing her like every other person she's met up to this point.
Yes.
And the ape man finds out and beats the poor boy to death.
The portrayal of straight men in this book, it's a little much. Like, she's very clearly painting this story or telling this tale of her opinion of men being horrible. I mean, there could have been one good guy. I mean, I guess Jack is technically a good guy, but...
He's hatching.
He's
incubating.
He's incubated. It was just so horrible and depressing reading about Mignon. Also, the fact that her name is steak. Like, just piece of meat. Literally.
Filet mignon?
Yeah. That's what it made me think of.
That's not how the word is used in the everyday
I don't know
French
what it means
vocabulary.
in the everyday.
It means cute.
Oh, okay.
A filet mignon, it's a cute cut.
Oh, it's a
meat.
cute filet.
Because
Okay.
it's little.
It just immediately made me
just,
think of steak.
You know, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's little, it's cute. Yeah, that means cute.
Okay, fair enough. I had a steak association, and I was like, that's a little on the nose.
Maybe that's what, as an English author, is what she was going for. That's not what I thought of as a person who has studied French.
Well, and it could also be both, right? Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Maybe that's why she used the masculine form instead of the feminine, which I think would be more appropriate for a girl's name.
Yeah. We should also mention Mignon is German.
Yeah, she doesn't speak English.
Or French.
Jack can't actually talk to her.
No, but so Jack rescues her from the tiger, and she's grateful.
Yeah, but here's the thing. She was not wearing clothes because she was, doing it with strong man.
Yeah.
Jack was not wearing clothes because he let the apes take all his clothes off. So now everyone in the circus thinks that he was the one with Mignon. The ape man beats Mignon.
Yes.
And she goes to Jack for help, and he takes her to Fevers in her very fancy hotel room. Fevers is also not pleased about this. She thinks, or she believes the story that Jack was the one, and she's very unhappy about that.
Yeah.
Is it because she's jealous?
I think that's what we're supposed to think.
Yes. I mean, I guess I understand why Jack's so fascinated with, a winged woman, because especially with her tall tail. But I don't really think that there's any reason for Fevers to like Jack as much as she does at this point in the story.
Jack is kind of, in the first part, the audience stand-in. He's just there as a vehicle for Fevers to narrate her story to us as the audience.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense that he has no personality in that regard. And I also think the first part is set up because he becomes obsessed with Fevers, which is why he follows her to the circus and how the rest of the book happens. And I think that's supposed to be us as the audience. That's supposed to lead us through the rest of it. There's just really... There's nothing between them. There's no spark, there's no whatever.
Fevers does help Mignon, and she gets her bathed and feeds her chocolates and...
Yeah, takes care of her.
And then Mignon starts singing, and they all realize that Mignon has a beautiful singing voice. Fevers introduces Mignon to the princess, who's the tiger tamer, and they come up with a musical act with the tigers. This is important later. But also, it is notable, he's very injured, right?
Yeah, he basically can't use his right arms, which means he is not click-clacking away on his little typewriter.
No, so he's lost his job. Like his real job, the real purpose he's here. And we said Jack is incubating, right?
Yes.
He's still not quite the kind of man we're supposed to like yet. Because at this point in the story, he has a thought about himself abusing Mignon.
Yes.
And he's stopped because his arm hurts too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, he has another impulsive thought.
I did also clock that,
and
unfortunately.
A really gross one.
I did also clock that, unfortunately. And that's the other thing with Jack as the narrator, I guess, the point of view character. He's just not only does he not have very much personality, the personality he has isn't very likable.
No, at this point he's basically, or I should say, at every point in the story, he's just letting himself get whipped around by whoever. He doesn't really have any agency through the whole story at all.
No, he doesn't. He makes these impulsive decisions, but the biggest thing he does is tell his boss, I'm gonna go join the circus. That's like the most active thing he does. And now, with his arm injured, he's literally just a clown now. As we discussed earlier, he's lost his initial piece of himself. He's just a clown.
And he can't even really, I guess, assert himself against these, like, base thoughts that he has.
No, like, he's still having these thoughts, like, despite going through all this stuff and seeing the horrible abuse that Mignon was suffering and helping her, he's still having those thoughts. And it's like, you just want to shake him.
So then we actually, keep going through the story here, we actually get a performance.
We do.
Of the circus.
Yeah.
And it all goes wrong.
It all goes horribly wrong. Yeah, that's why we get it.
So the other trapeze artist family I mentioned earlier tries to sabotage Fevers. She can fly, so obviously she saves herself.
Yeah.
But they are immediately fired.
They should be, honestly.
But now the Colonel's lost part of his attraction. The professor, you remember, is probably a chimpanzee.
Yes.
Approaches the Colonel with a new contract.
Mm-hmm.
But in this contract there's a clause that they can just leave. And the Colonel doesn't really read it.
Yeah.
Or he's kind of tricked into signing it. So the professor takes all his students.
And they leave.
Yeah. So there goes another part of that act. And I'm pretty sure that they find the 8-man trainer, like, really drunk and they just kind of throw him in a ditch somewhere.
Yeah.
Or just like a back alley, like he's just left behind.
They really, he does not get any sort of attention, which is fine.
Yeah. And then, because Jack he's got his arm in a sling and he can't really, this is how he becomes the human chicken, because he can only hold his arm a certain way.
Yeah.
And he's flapping his arms and that's about all he can do. So his debut performance happens to also be the same night that Buffo has drank himself into a different plane of existence.
Yes, Buffo, as we mentioned, has a binge drinking problem. He gives himself alcohol poisoning to the point where he has a mental breakdown.
He's supposed to, so the act is, Buffo is seated at a pretend table, right, and they bring out Jack on a serving dish, and but it's a clown, it's not really dinner. But Buffo actually starts trying to stab Jack with the dinner knife. And they're running around and he is actually trying to kill Jack Walzer.
Very scary.
The clowns do figure out what's happening. They do save Jack.
Yeah.
And Buffo, the star clown, gets taken to a mental asylum.
Yes, he tipped over from the farce into that being his reality.
Now the circus has lost the main clown. And it only gets worse from here.
Now this is very gothic.
Yeah, just tragedy after tragedy after and it's all in one night.
Yes.
And we're just boom, boom,
boom,
boom,
boom, boom.
The princess has to shoot one of her tigers because it tries to attack Mignon while Mignon is dancing with the tiger's mate.
Very reminiscent of the previous violence between...
And it was the same tiger that had escaped before. Too.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting parallel, I guess. The tiger gets jealous that Mignon is dancing with his mate. But the difference between the 8-man and the tiger is that the tiger doesn't go after his mate, he goes after the person dancing with his mate. Whereas the 8-man, when someone was sleeping with his wife, he's beat his wife, which is an interesting comparison. I believe the author is saying that if you abuse your spouse, you are less than an animal.
That could be, yeah.
Yeah, that was my takeaway.
And I think they need, at this point, Fevers to come out and do her act. The audience is traumatized by now.
Yeah.
The whole crowd is horrified, so they need Fevers to come and kind of save the night by doing something amazing. Her act goes well. They do, in fact, end with cheers. The circus at this point is on the verge of collapse.
In one night. One horrible night.
And the night's not even over.
No, it's not.
Because Fevers has a little bit of a date with the Duke.
With the Duke.
The Duke, yeah. This is where Fevers, because we mentioned before, she also has a love of money.
Yes, she does. She does.
This is where it almost gets her. The Duke has really nefarious things planned.
Yeah, nefarious, gross things.
Fevers walks into his house, and the first thing, he's got this huge ice sculpture of her. Which very menacingly starts melting as the night progresses.
Yeah, as it's kind of like background to the rest of the things that transpire, and you just get little descriptions of the state of the statue as things deteriorate.
But he's already sent her diamonds, so she's determined to get whatever it is she can out of him.
And now, this is not a popular decision she's made. Lizzie was not want her to do it.
Up until this point, Fevers has been in complete control of her story. From the narrative with Jack, being the triumphant finale of the circus.
Yeah.
This is where she starts, like the ice sculpture, coming apart. Things start going badly for her.
Yeah, she almost gets trapped here.
The Duke finds her sword, which is on her person, and he breaks it.
He takes the sword.
And he shows her, as we're getting back to the eggs, he's got 3, Fabergé eggs. And they're all decorated a different way. And the one is an empty bird cage one. I don't remember what the first one was. And then there was one that had a little train. And we can assume, based on the dialogue, that they're saying that he means, like, the egg is... It's a literal cage. Like, he means to entrap her here.
Yes. And she does realize that when she sees that there's a cage with no bird in it.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, oh, I'm the bird.
So what does she do?
She jumps.
She very mysteriously jumps into the train egg.
Yeah, now this was something, again, I was kind of skimming a little bit, but I had to thoroughly read this part, because it was very confusing.
It was very vague.
It was very vague, and I was like, so into the egg? How big are these eggs?
I was also wondering this, and I spent a good amount of time looking up Fabergé eggs.
Because they're not usually big.
Also, too, I'm like, how do you have, like, a train inside an egg? Because usually when you think about these eggs, you think about just, like, the egg shape, and they're covered in jewels and gold and stuff, but they open.
That's true.
And there's little models of things inside of them.
Yeah.
So I spent a long time looking at eggs, trying to figure out the mechanics.
Either they were extremely large and their scale was not described, or Fevers, a larger-than-life woman, just decided it was going to be a portal and dove into it, and it worked.
I just was thinking it was a portal.
Yeah. Do we want to get into the weird sexual stuff in that scene, or no? Probably not, right?
No.
We'll just mention the Duke wanted to trap her, and as in the scene in the first part with the cult guy, there was a penis involved.
Yeah, I think at this point you can just assume that most of the men met so far, except for maybe, like, the Colonel, who interact with women, have some sort of sexual intention.
Yeah, negative, nefarious sexual intentions.
Yes.
The Colonel... Yeah, the Colonel doesn't have that.
The Colonel...
He's just money.
Yes.
he just sees money. That's all he cares about. He doesn't care about the physicality.
He's a trope.
Yeah. He's purely an American caricature.
I will say most of the characters in this are pretty one-dimensional.
Yeah, they really are. Because it's a fairy tale. Because they all serve a purpose. They're all teaching you a lesson. As soon as that lesson is done, they're off the page. You move on.
The portal works. And Fevers does end up in the train with the rest of the circus.
Yes.
They're about to traverse Siberia on their way to Japan.
That was part 2. The end of part 2.
Yes, this is how part 2 ends.
The Duke. And part 3 begins with, Fevers is on the train again. And also at the beginning of part 3, there's a scene where, what's his name, Ivan? Mm-hmm. The grandkid of the Russian lady.
Yeah. He's
like, I want to join the circus. I want to be a clown.
Jack throws him off the train.
Jack literally picks him up and throws him off the train and leaves him behind. And it's such a quick scene. Granted, most of the scenes in this book are pretty snappy. She doesn't spend a lot of time on them.
No, that's why we have been talking so much, because so much happens.
But that was it was such a throwaway, oh yeah, also Jack found Ivan and he threw him off the train. There was no time spent on that, no nothing. So I guess we're not going to spend any time on it. But no. Ivan got over his fear of clowns and decided he wanted to be one, and Jack was like,
I will give Jack this.
Yeah.
No one wants to join this circus.
No. And it's a good thing. He kicked Ivan off the train because this train is ill-fated.
Yeah, it derails.
It's sabotaged by people who are after Fevers again. Once again, Fevers is the center.
The reason that they want her is because they think that she's engaged to the Prince of Wales.
Yes.
And that she has communication with the Queen, and they think that the Queen is going to help them get pardoned.
By the Tsar.
Yeah.
Very convoluted reasoning.
Fevers does have to tell them that she has no connection to any of the royal family.
So basically, they derailed this train, caused all this mayhem and chaos, and...
This was upsetting to read as well. We know, being a circus, there were a lot of animals on board. What it described happening to the tigers was very unclear, and I thought it was trying to tell us that they had died in the crash, but they don't.
Yeah, they live.
For some reason, they were also inside shards of mirrors.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure...
Not only did the train derail, but the story kind of derailed.
Yeah, it did. This tone of this part was totally different than the other two.
Again, a lot of stuff happens in this part, but it's even more pointless than the stuff that came before it. It's like...
Yeah, there's a whole long sequence about a women's prison telling us about this one character in particular and how she got to be in the prison and the rules of the prison and why the prison was founded. And it was because this countess had murdered her husband and she wanted to atone for her sins, but not really. So she was going to vicariously atone for her sins by running a prison for women murderers. And then when they atoned, she would let them go, and by doing this would feel better about herself, except she never let them go. The place had such strict rules that, like, they couldn't talk to each other, they weren't allowed to do anything. Really the kind of place that would make you lose your mind.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so then the women start, like, secretly communicating with each other, and then they all rise up, including the guards. The guards and the prisoners all start having secret communications, and they all fall in love, and they rise up and overthrow the evil countess and escape the prison.
And why was this in this book? I'm shrugging.
I don't know. After the train derails and Fevers and most of the circus are taken away by the bandits, Jack is left behind.
Yes, he's in the rubble.
And he's found by the escapees of this prison, and they kind of help him a little bit. He's completely lost everything. No memories, no idea who he is, where he is. All he remembers is chicken.
Yep.
This is important because we have to get rid of the old Jack.
Yes.
Jack needs to be reborn as a new person. But he's found by the women and they kind of help him. But then the women leave him.
Yeah, they just leave him.
And he's found by a shaman. Now here's the other thing too. The women eventually also run into a man escapee from a male prison. And he tells Fevers that he had run into them because the women all decided they're going to start their own colony of just women.
Yeah.
And they ask this escapee for semen so they could reproduce.
Yeah.
And then Fever asks him, but what happens if they have boys?
Mm-hmm.
Which is never answered.
No. It's a valid question.
We could have cut out this whole thing with the women's prison and just had this other escapee. Gender irrelevant. It could have been a man or a woman at this point.
Yeah.
Have this person run into Jack and then maybe leave him there, and then that person also be the person who runs into Fevers and relays to her what happened to Jack.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't need this whole chain of command here.
The whole women's prison is just, again, Angela Carter had things to say. And
Yeah,
she was going to say them in this whole book.
That's basically it.
Jack, with his lost memory, is training to be a shaman. That's it.
Yeah,
that's really.
we learn a bit about the shaman. It's this kind of remote village, and they have some beliefs and practices that are presented to us as kind of primitive. I don't want to say like uncivilized, but that is how they're kind of presented to us.
Yeah, we're supposed to think that they're uncivilized.
Meanwhile, Fevers is completely falling apart.
Yeah, she lost the sword.
She lost the sword, one of her wings is injured and she can't fly. Her hair is growing out so they can't bleach it. She's not a complete blonde anymore. So she's falling apart in the wilderness. Here's another one of those weird things. The bandits and the clowns all get blown away in a blizzard.
Yeah.
Where did they go? Well, Feather says at one point, well, I hope that the bandits all went back to their families and had a happy life, so I guess they're not dead.
Yeah. Who knows?
But we don't know. It just says the wind came and blew them all away. The clowns and all their dogs, except for one. Rest in peace.
Reality is just degrading. It kind of, like, Fevers jumps into a Fabergé egg, ends up on the train. And then there's all this random stuff with the shaman happens, and the bandits and the clowns get blown away. There's no explanation. Nobody questions it. These things happen, and they go, okay, yeah.
They kind of wander through the wilderness for a while, and then they find a house.
Yeah, like in a lonely house.
Yeah, and they are in there, and listen, at this point, they were all like, oh, we're pretty hungry, we need to eat something. And they took a vote on whether or not they should eat Sybil. If they had eaten Sybil, I would have quit the book right there.
Yeah.
They ate the dog, though, which was not any better.
No. The dog didn't have a name.
Also, all the elephants died.
Very sad.
This is where I was just like, man, this book is not for animal lovers.
No, it really isn't.
But the house is owned by a man who had been trying to start a music school in a nearby town, and it didn't really go very well. And at first, he's all very angry to see them in his house, but then because he has a piano and the princess tunes it and Mignon sings so nicely, he decides to help them out. We didn't really get into it earlier, but at this point, Mignon and the princess are just a couple.
Yeah,
they're in love.
They literally, the first time they meet, Mignon sings, and then they kiss, and then they're in love, and that's it.
Yep.
Very fairy tale. I'll accept it because they're lesbians, though. But yeah, they're a couple. That's the most interesting part of this.
This is the most compelling love story in the book.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Because meanwhile, we're told more overtly that Fevers does have romantic feelings for Jack.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, for some reason. Because Lizzie keeps saying things to her, is like, well, what are you going to do about getting married? And Fevers is kind of worrying. She doesn't want to settle into a traditional role. Mm-hmm. Here's where we have to remember. This is where Lizzie used the term, the new woman. Because Fevers is the new woman. She hatched from the egg.
Yep.
A totally different kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
But we need Jack to become the new man.
Yes, and he did lose his memories.
He only remembers chicken.
He only remembers chicken, which chickens come from eggs.
They do.
Oh, I had a thought about Fevers being the new woman, because Fevers is the new woman when she's born, right? That's like the whole thing. But then even in this part, she's kind of a new woman, because she's lost bits of her identity. She's lost the sword. Her hair is growing out. She can't bleach it. It's cracked. Her exterior is cracked. Mm-hmm. Also like an egg. Where she's not as put together. She's not as in control. She's no longer in control of the narrative the way she was.
Did you notice, too, points where the point of view perspective shifted?
It switched, yes.
And also the tense shifted.
I did notice that.
And at first I was like, man, this is really irritating. But I guess it was supposed to go back to the playing with time and how they were tricking Jack into thinking that hours had not, in fact, passed when they had.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was also the clock. Lizzie lost the Admiral's clock.
Yeah.
And she was in her bag. She was upset about that, too.
Yeah, the magic bag and the magic clock.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it's like Fevers was literally taking over, not just like the story in like, you know, a story sense, but literally on the page.
Mm-hmm. The narrative.
She was taking it over. And we were getting it in her point of view and her voice in first person.
It's very jarring as a reader.
It is, especially because that only starts happening in the third part. It's not like it had been going on through the whole story. It's only in that last part.
So it really just kind of smacks you in the face, and you have no time to figure it out or get used to it, and then the book ends.
Well, also, it's not even for the whole part. It's just like for a couple paragraphs.
Like a couple paragraphs, yeah. So I was not a huge fan of that.
But after all this, they do find Jack with the shaman, and they save a bear.
They do.
We were this close to like every animal you could think of dying in this book almost happened. But they saved the bear.
Well, and they think Fevers is an evil spirit because of the wings.
They do rescue Jack. Jack does get most of his memories back.
Yes, he sees Fevers and he goes, I know you.
And then Lizzie and Fevers save a woman who had just given birth and was left alone in this shack because that was the custom of this village. And
yeah, and then they bring the baby back to the village.
Yeah, because obviously this was presented to us as like one of their backwards, uncivilized customs that wasn't working. So
yeah, that scene also struck me as something. I was like, why does this exist? The whole thing with the baby. Like, do we need another metaphor about the new century, the new woman, the this, that, and the other thing?
Well, we do, because now it's New Year's.
Of course, yeah.
It's literally about to become
it's the new millennium!
Yeah.
Yeah, so then Jack and Fevers end up together, and they live happily ever after. The end.
Yeah, our very last scene with them is...
They're in bed together.
They're still in the village with the shaman. Jack asks Fevers, why did you pretend to be... The exact wordings on that page.
Yeah, I'm trying to find... Oh yeah, here we go. Only one question. Why did you go to such lengths once upon a time to convince me you were the only fully feathered tacta in the history of the world? She began to laugh. I fooled you then. God, I fooled you. You mustn't believe what you write in the papers.
It never disproves the wings. And he even makes a comment that they have to have sex with her on top because of the wings.
Because of the wing. Yeah, they literally, yeah.
The wings are real.
Mm-hmm.
This is confirmed at this point. So he's asking, why did you pretend to be an intacta? Why did you pretend to be a virgin?
Yeah.
Through the whole story. And maybe this is just like the modern person and me being like, why is it that important?
Yeah.
Like, the wings are by far more compelling.
And like, maybe it's supposed to be a switcheroo, right?
I'm sure that is, because I guess up until this point, you're like, oh, Feathers was, still like, whatever. I don't know, maybe it was just supposed to be a clever way of telling us the wings were real, but not everything else that she said was.
A very unsatisfying ending.
I also just didn't like the last sentence.
No, yeah, I was just about to bring that up. The last sentence. To think I really fooled you, she marveled. It just goes to show there's nothing like confidence.
That's a terrible last line.
For this book? This book was not about having confidence.
No, yeah, it's just for everything that happened, and then for that to be the end.
The culmination.
It's a little bit of a letdown.
I have two kind of concluding thoughts I want to talk to, my overall thoughts of the book. First of all, the entire book is just about the performance of culture and society. Like, the entire society is a circus, but the circus in the book is a direct representation of the show that we as people in a society put on.
All the world's a stage?
Yes, all the world's a stage, including gender roles. The role of men, the role of women, the expected roles, and then the ways to subvert them. That's basically, like, the whole book.
Yeah, there was never any question that Feathers was confident.
No! Like, that's the thing. And there was also never any question that she was probably leading Jack on, at least in some aspect.
Yeah.
Like, she was definitely she and Lizzie were pulling one over on him. Like, that was very clear.
Oh, yeah.
And he went along with it happily. I also thought a lot about, I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is a big thing in, like, queer circles. The idea of gender as drag, where literally any expression of gender is drag. Even if you, for example, if a cisgender woman is being feminine, you're still, I'm not explaining this very well, but even if you as a cisgender person are comfortable in femininity, for example, if you're a cisgender woman, you're comfortable in femininity and you enjoy portraying yourself that way, you are still putting on gender as a show. And with the focus in this book on, in particular, femininity, but also the different kinds of femininity and the different, even sexualities, right? We had a trans person, ? In the first part. There was a he/she.
Oh, at least a very androgynous
person. I don't know if maybe they're supposed to be intersex. Some sort of genderqueer person.
Mm-hmm.
We had representations of actual queer people. We had the lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
We had the gay man who met the unfortunate fate. So, like, the whole thing is just performance. Even in the aspect of it being a fairy tale and it being absolutely bonkers and just making no sense and falling apart and things not mattering. It's all to put on a very specific show, which is like this fairy tale quality of these different aspects. Now, I was reading when I was reading about this book, people were comparing it to 1001 Nights. I've never read that, so I don't know if kind of myriad aspects that all get thrown in and tossed aside in this book. I don't know if that is similar to the way 1001 Nights is structured. That was the impression I got from reading about other people comparing it. So maybe that, maybe if I had read 1001 Nights, I would appreciate this more. But in the end, it was just very unsatisfying. We had some good conversations.
Oh, yeah, there's no denying that it had themes.
It had themes, and it did make me think about gender and gender roles and, different portrayals of that kind of thing. So, it was interesting.
But the book has a very icky quality to it that's never redeemed.
No, it's never redeemed. And even Feathers, as a character, she's not, I'm not endeared to her in any way. She is also kind of, I don't hate her by any means, and but she is also, as a character, kind of repulsive. And I think she's kind of designed to be repulsive. They describe her as being, she's got her dirty laundry all over the room, and, being really uncouth, slobby, and she belches, she does all this stuff. I don't know,
Well, in the end, she was lying about a lot of things.
But not the wings.
Wings were real.
The only real thing were the wings.
Yeah, even her hair wasn't actually blonde.
Her hair was a farce.
That was the newest book we'd read so far.
Yeah, that's true. 83?
It was the 80s, yeah. Definitely very different than things from the Victorian era.
1984.
Prior to the Victorian era.
But still about the Victorian era.
Still about the Victorian era. Yeah, that's right.
So let us know what you think. What are your thoughts on gender as drag and gender roles and the new millennium?
Nothing heavy here.
No,
just a little light conversation.
How do you feel about eggs?
What's your favorite way to eat an egg?
No, there we go. Tell us what your favorite way to eat an egg is. And I guess we'll start off the next episode with our favorite way to eat.
Alright, we can't forget this question now.
Oh.
We're gonna have to start writing them down.
That's true. So until next time.
You know something? Coincidental?
What?
This will be our first episode of the new year.
Fitting. We did talk about the new millennium.
Will we be new people? Probably not.
No.
We'll probably be the same. We'll be exactly the same. We were kidding.
But it'll be 2025.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm not excited. But, well, so that's it for 2024, y'all.
Well, this will be out in January.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're still in 2024. So, hello to the future.
When you're listening to this, it will no longer be 2024.
Well,
Bye!
Goodbye.